Welcome to the Building Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Dom Taujanskas, and join us as we explore the world of construction. Each episode, we welcome a guest that shares career highlights and career advice, and hopefully inspires the next generation of construction professionals. Welcome to another edition of the Building Your Career podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have as a guest Spencer McGawley, who's a director at Temple Group and someone who I'm much looking forward to having a chat with. So I suppose we'll start off where we always start off. Spencer, if you could tell us a little bit about your current job role, what you do day to day, and a little bit more about Temple Group as well.
Sure. Okay. Thanks very much, Dom, for having me on. And welcome to all the listeners out there today. So as Dom's already said, I'm a director at the Temple Group, who are a planning, sustainability and environmental company who support developments across the country. My particular role crosses sort of the property sector, planning and infrastructure. And that's from local infrastructure, nationally significant infrastructure projects, NSIPs. And my role really, at its very basis, is to form and run cross-functional teams on projects of all those scales. From obviously working on HS2 at the moment, obviously the biggest project, down to very, very small, local regeneration schemes, sort of repurposing of sort of a commercial property for sort of residential purposes. That's very popular at the moment. So I range across all those scales, and I also act as an expert advisor on environment and planning for a number of local authorities around the country. Mm-hmm. So I act as a third party reviewer for them, and also provide advice on applications.
Okay.
So it's a pretty varied role. I have sites all over the country. I live in the southwest, but I work across London, Yorkshire, Midlands, wherever I'm needed.
Okay.
And we'll get to that because that's been a feature of my career.
Oh, definitely. And out of interest, in terms of the team underneath you and the different kind of job roles within that team, because obviously people like knowing what the options are available and what each particular person does. So you don't need to go into too much detail, but what is it that the people, your team do, kind of on a day-to-day basis? And is there any kind of specialities that people could get involved in?
Yeah. Sort of environmental sustainability is a very, very broad church. So there are hundreds and hundreds of different types of roles you can take within it, and that's very, I think, important for your listeners to get the hang of that. Mm-hmm. The people who I've got working for me, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I'll be talking to arboriculturalists, ecologists, noise and air quality specialists, town and country planners, sort of engineers, structural, civil, mechanical engineers, transport engineers. So all those things that input into the development of a project, those are people who I'll be dealing with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And the variety is huge.
Definitely. And that's what we're trying to promote here, is that it's not just one thing that you have to get involved in construction. There's loads of different opportunities available and lots of different career paths you can take. But I mean, if we could turn back the hands of time then, Spencer, where did it all start for you? Where did your interest start in construction and sustainability, and how did you kind of develop your career then?
I think for me, I actually come from a long line of engineers. My great-grandfather, he actually built the glass factory in Nottingham, which is actually a World Heritage Site. He did that. And my grandfather built the Fremantle Power Station in Perth after the war in Australia. So on the back of that, I did nothing like that at all. I was always much more interested in sort of, landscape development, environment, land management. I grew up in the country, so land management was something that, I was always very interested in. But I think particularly, if you were to sort of distill it down to sort of the key points, the thing that interests me most is human interaction with the environment. Mm-hmm. And I think the mistake a lot of people make is they see sort of the human environment and the natural environment as distinct elements, and they're not. Mm-hmm. They're not. The environment is only important because we give it importance. And how humans move, live, exploit the environment has always been something that's just interested me massively. So that's kind of sort of on a conceptual level. I became interested in more specific environment issues, I was actually at university in Canada, and we covered something called environmental impact assessment, EIA, which was not that big in the UK at the time, but it was much, much bigger in Canada, and we looked at it a lot. And I thought, oh, actually, that looks quite interesting. That's something that it sounded like it's something I could get into and that would make a difference to developments, and make them as good as they could be. So I think so having sort of, belittled my engineering forebears, I'm a frustrated engineer and designer at heart, because that's the kind of the role I've ended up doing my whole life. So on the back of that, I undertook a master's degree in environmental assessment. Okay, that was quite a long time ago now, and we looked at all elements of, sounds redundant, assessing the environment, and the complexities that you get associated with that, and the trade-offs you get associated with that. And then I picked up my first job, which I've put in my notes as intern, which is a euphemism for working for free, which you can't do anymore. We can't do anymore. But after I finished my master's degree, I actually contacted a small independent environmental consultancy who actually were in the same area I was living in. And I asked if they had any jobs going, and they said they didn't. So I managed to ring them and get through to the chairman just by chance. And they said, no, we haven't got anything. And I said, well, I'll come and work for free, which they became a bit more interested in me at that point. So I went and, I worked for them for a few months and got offered a contract and sort of started paid employment from there. And so on the back of that, I've done a bit of everything, going back, into the midst of time. I've done a lot of contaminated land work, drilling, sampling, water policy research. I did a lot of that. Noise surveys. I used to climb stacks at steel mills to do air quality monitoring. All night batch surveys. Literally everything. I did as part of that role, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the site work a lot. I liked the outdoors. I always have done, and I went everywhere. As a result of this. So that was so it was quite good. I did once bid for a beach survey job in Antigua, but we didn't actually win that one. That's a true story. We did actually try and get that, but we didn't actually get that, which is a bit of a shame. So, but see, you see a lot. You see a lot when you're doing that kind of work. I mean, staying in out of season hotels in sort of northern holiday towns. It's certainly a bit of a vibe and things like that. But yeah, so it was a mixed experience, but it was a good one because it gave me lots of different visions of different parts of the industry, and I think that's certainly had a massive influence on how my career turned out, because I had that very, very broad background, which has served me really, really well.
Definitely. And I think I just you touched on it there at the beginning of that. I think, a lot of our listeners there's a lot of TLAs or three-letter abbreviations out there in the industry at the moment. And I think you touched on one and broke it down a little bit, but the EIA side of things. So could you just kind of expand on that? Because I know a lot of our listeners who are looking at job roles, it would be on the EIA sector, and not really too sure what that kind of means. So could you kind of break that down for our listeners?
Yeah, so environmental impact assessment is effectively a planning tool to enable decision makers to assess the potential effects of a scheme on the environment. That, in a nutshell, that's what it does. In practice, what that means is undertaking a series of surveys and assessments of the site, understanding what we call the baseline situation is, so what's there at the moment, what elements of the design are going to change that baseline, and what it's going to look like in the future. And then basically undertaking there's a certain element of value judgment as to whether those things are positive or negative, and actually how significant, that's the key phrase, significant, how significant they are likely to be, and how much mitigation they require to remove those impacts. So the key thing about that is that it should happen in sort of phases and iterative cycles. So your initial design, you look at your initial design, you say, okay, well, that's looking a little bit expensive in terms of environmental costs and damage. Let's come up with something else. And so you look to sort of finesse the design, which can be done by changing the building footprint, location of buildings, location of access roads, retention of habitats on site. That's a big one these days. You do that a lot more than you used to, believe me. to try and get the scheme that not only reduces impact but actually delivers positive benefits. And that's all the more important with the upcoming 10% biodiversity requirements that you're going to see in all developments from November.
Mm-hmm.
So all new schemes will require to demonstrate an increase in biodiversity value on their sites of 10%. So the days of filling up a site with car parking and steel sheds are very much in the past.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you for breaking that down in kind of simple terms. And I suppose if we could, knowing what you know now, if you could go back to speak to your younger self and give yourself just one piece of advice when you first started out, what advice would you give?
I haven't got one piece of advice. There's not a single piece. There's not a single piece of advice, but
as many as you like.
As to me. Perhaps if there was one overarching piece, it'd be ready to be flexible.
Yeah,
particularly when starting out, because we said at the beginning, there are hundreds of subsets of work which can fall in sort of sustainable environment construction, and you need to be in a position to look at those. It's a very, very non-linear industry, particularly if you're working for a smaller company.
Mm-hmm.
So you might get asked, as I certainly did, you might find yourself doing lots and lots and lots of different things almost on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's important to understand that opportunities come in all shapes and sizes. And it might not necessarily be what you expected it to be. And you might find yourself doing something, for example, I had no interest, but I had no interest in working as a noise consultant. But actually I ended up doing that for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And I did my Institute of Acoustics qualifications on the back of that. I even got involved with web design at my first company because in the early days of the internet, they needed a new website and I was the new guy. So I learned how to code websites and I spent probably a year, 2 years developing websites for them and other companies in the group. So, and there was a period where I did think about becoming a web designer entirely on the back of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that was something that was a bit out of off the cuff. If you'd have said, "Oh, you're going to get into website," no. But these opportunities come. So I think really my advice is sort of try everything, and be open to it, and see where it leads you. It could lead you places you never thought, and give you exposure to things you didn't realise. There is a rider to that, and that is don't allow yourself to be sandboxed.
Yes.
So don't allow yourself to be stuck in too much of a niche too soon.
Yes.
It's very, very easy to have that happen to you, particularly as a junior employee. And, you just end up doing the same little type of work. Can be a bit mundane, can be a bit dull. Now that's all part of the job. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. Those roles are important. But I think from a career perspective, it's important that you don't allow yourself to be stuck in those roles too long.
Yep.
And there's a context to it. And I'd say I'd go a step further and actually I'd make your employer try and work for you a little bit, because you shouldn't be afraid of being aggressive in your career. And probably I wasn't aggressive enough early on, I think. There always used to be a thing that if you change jobs too many times, you became less employable. But that doesn't seem to be the problem it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not getting the opportunities where you are, you should certainly go and look to find the opportunities elsewhere. Because no one else will look after your success but you. Mm-hmm. And with the best, and I say this as a manager of people and a mentor of people, I try my best for the people I look after, but fundamentally, I can only do so much. And you need to be very active and have agency in what you're doing. So I think that would be. It's kind of a few points there, but they all go around the same point.
No,
really, don't they?
Truly solid advice there, and that kind of shadows a guest that we've had on previously, whose one biggest regret was sticking in the same thing for 8 years at the beginning of his career, where it wasn't really for him, but he felt like he had to kind of stick with it because it was his first job. But as you've touched upon there, don't be afraid to expand the jobs that you're doing or expand your experience. There's always different avenues, different ways of doing things. So if it's not working, then move on and try something else.
And I think to add a little bit to that, just because you think your career isn't working out as well as maybe the person who sits next to you or, your friends and colleagues, you need to remember that your experience is utterly unique. and there's always somebody who will want your type of experience. As I said, I alluded to the fact I did a lot in my early career. And if for a long time, 3 or 4 years, it felt very much like I was a little bit lost because I was just being pushed pillar to post.
Yeah.
But as I became more senior, actually that experience was really, really important because there are very few people who've done the broad range, and I can sit and talk eye to eye with a civil engineer, a structural engineer, an acoustic engineer, and we can talk the same language, and and that alone has value. So I think whatever your experience is, don't devalue it, and remember, it's just finding the right person and the right company who will take that experience and see it for what it is.
Are you a job seeker, tired of endlessly scrolling through job boards with no success? Has your job search hit a dead end? Well, we're here to tell you there's another way. Here at Quest Personnel, we offer a variety of free resources to help job seekers just like you. Our team of expert recruiters is here to help you through every step of the job search process, from CV writing to interview techniques. But that's not all. We also offer exclusive access to workshops, networking events, and other job roles that you simply won't find anywhere else. So what are you waiting for? Get in touch now on our website, questpersonnel.co.uk. Yeah, definitely. I can completely agree with you there. And I think that's some really, really solid advice for people first starting off as well. But just to kind of expand on that, when people are first starting off then, what are the career routes available for people, either, kind of going down the educational route or perhaps, as maybe our previous guest, Howard, started off, was just going down the volunteering route. So what are the different career paths available for some of the people just starting off at the beginning?
Yeah, I think certainly, again, these days there are huge, huge options. Perhaps more than there were. My colleague Howard, he started volunteering. We've said, I work for free, so I went to a company and said, look, I'll just come and. Now you can't do that now, but you can certainly offer to shadow. There are. Being proactive and asking for these things, companies will take you on, and I certainly try to take people on and help them with that. With the internet, social media, and all that, there's loads of ways you can get involved with lots of different environmental sustainability type causes. It doesn't have to be campaigning, but there's always there's all kinds of local groups you can get involved with. The environment now is such a big part of our daily conversation. It's way easy to get into it. When I started, it was still very much a niche thing, but we're now talking about it as it's a mainstream thing. It's every news story is now referring to environmental issues. So there are opportunities to get that. In terms of sort of getting you start and your training, again, I've come through the academic route, so that's the route I know best, and I certainly would recommend that if you are capable of doing that. I personally like to see a degree and a master's degree. There's a reason I ask for a master's degree quite often, because it just gives you that high level of analytical skills and information management, which you perhaps don't get at graduate level. So it's just you can do, but because what you want is someone who can synthesize large amounts of information and make sense of them. A lot of what we do is making the complex simple. And being able to present that to regulators, to decision makers, and to the and to the public, and that does require a certain ability to sort of understand complex scientific information and understand the scientific method. But there are technical routes in as well. You can start doing technical site work. I worked on the drilling rigs in Tower Hamlets in East London for a long time with guys who didn't have degrees, and they enjoyed their jobs immensely. They're outdoors all the time. A lot of them got paid more than me as well, actually, I realised, but at the time. So there are other ways in. There are sort of ecological survey type. You can get into that. Trees, arboriculture, particularly, that doesn't necessarily need to be graduate entry. They just need people who are good outdoors and can handle themselves in sort of, not extreme environments, but environments that require a bit of nous and a bit of looking after yourself. So it is a very, very broad church. It's a very broad church, and it's not a decision you perhaps make early in your career, but at some point you need to start thinking: do you want to be more of a technical person, or are you going to be more of a managerial person? because one doesn't always lead to the other. And, the standard approach for many years is very much you do your time in a technical team, and then at some point the Peter principle promotes you out of that into management. But that doesn't always work, because, no one trains in ecology to then spend their days usually looking at spreadsheets, scheduling surveys. They want to go on site. They want to do things, It's the same thing. So it really depends what you're into and what you're after. And both are perfectly available and perfectly valid. Some people don't like the management at all. They just like technical work, and some people don't like the technical work, but they understand the management better. So there's a lot you can do depending on which is what you like. And there's lots of ways to do it.
Okay, brilliant. And just leading on to kind of our final question as well. I attended an event last night with Youth Build UK, which was a real eye-opener for me, because it was full of like-minded people all in the same room, all trying to do something about reaching out to the younger generation in construction, and some really good speakers there about people, trying to make a difference, and lots of different ideas as well. So I just wanted to see, from your perspective, maybe what is the industry not doing so well at the moment to attract and retain the young talent, and what could the industry as a whole maybe do better? And that could be, kind of at the director level or business owner level, or even the HR and learning and development team. So what's going wrong, and what can we do about it?
Okay, I think I'm going to start by saying in our part of the construction industry, we don't struggle with young talent, because environmental issues are a big deal. A lot of people are coming through, and you get, as I said, once upon a time people would have gone into sort of engineering. Now they tend to go into environment. That's kind of how that's shifted. So it's not there's not really a talent loss really than perhaps other things. But that probably explains perhaps the struggles elsewhere in the construction sector, perhaps. But anyway, that will go. That's not my job to fix that today. But I think probably the key thing is that the whole industry is changing. I mean, it's changing fundamentally, and it's perhaps changing more fundamentally in ways that people don't really understand. Because the way we talk about sustainability environment is different now. And we've already talked about it on in the questions previously about climate change is everywhere. Carbon management is everywhere. And that was never the case. That was never the case. So, some of us long-suffering sort of environmental consultants who've spent years trying to make our case, all of a sudden this stuff is there. So, but in terms of for younger talent, technology is becoming way more important than it used to. Data visualization is big. Those are the skills that young people coming in the industry have and can get more, because they've grown up as digital literate. When I first started, directors still had PAs, and we didn't quite have a typing pool, but it wasn't far off. But you don't get that at all now, and so there are changes, and particularly I think there's a recognition, or there needs to be more recognition that young talent wants flexibility and experiences. So I said sandboxing someone isn't gonna. 30 years ago, that would probably have worked. Someone would have sat and done their time in a corner office or a corner desk in a larger office. That's not going to happen these days. Bright people are going to want to go off and do other things, and you've got this much higher information mobility, I call it. So there's a lot more information available, and as a result there's a lot more opportunities. Travel's easier. It's much easier to be footloose. So companies need to work hard. They need to work hard to understand what young talent wants and what they can actually deliver. And there's no point trying to make them deliver something they're not hardwired to do.
Yes.
And I think that's where you get the big mistake, is where you get the big old dinosaur civil engineer project manager who just really doesn't understand why the 23-year-old ecologist is telling him he's wrong and just wants to get rid of them. And, it's having that, and because I said it's a non-linear industry, so it can be hard to find a firm career path at times. And I think companies just need to recognise that as well, and just say, okay, what can we do? What can we do with the technology? What can we do with these young people who've got these new ideas? And it is a good industry for that. It is an innovative industry. And I think probably in terms of the way that innovation is being dealt with in environment sustainability, I mean, we are at the beginning of the gold rush.
Yeah.
Because for the first time, we've really got some proper techniques that we can use. We're not just going out and measuring stuff, but we can now do really, really, good analysis. AI, which is a lot of talk about AI coming up at the moment, big data harvesting, looking at behavioral data. So these things are there, and to the softer stuff, the sort of media outreach, public outreach, the social media does give you an opportunity to make much greater, outreach into the community, into the areas, and those are fundamentally important to keep people informed. So there are, probably the big challenge is sort of matching these emerging skills with the traditional way of doing large projects.
Yep.
And it is changing and it is getting better, but there's way more opportunity for companies to get better at that.
Oh, definitely. And I think just kind of touching on obviously AI is a massive talking point at the moment. And I think a lot of it can be kind of very negatively focused. So can you see any kind of benefits to AI within the sector that is either kind of coming in now or might be used in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, you to say it's out of the box isn't true, because that implies it's something very, very negative. But what AI will allow us to do is allow us to do a lot of the bulk work far easier. And that then allows the human intellect to sort of focus on the things that, the creativity side of it, because that's the stuff AI isn't quite as good at. So it's very good at large jobs. It's not very good at the small nuanced stuff. And that's where in terms of people's creativity, that's the human essence. That, humans are a fundamentally creative species. And we were a fundamentally creative species until the Industrial Revolution, where everything got systemized and everyone was sent to work in mines or factories. And we still have a little bit of that attitude today, that our education system is still sort of putting people out to sort of work in those environments. And that's not people's, best endeavor, and I think if we can harness the likes of AI and, and other like Python data management tools. So instead of sitting there and spending hours processing stuff by eye, and believe me, I've done a lot of that over the years, and it has its value. You do get a lot of data understanding when you do it by hand. Yeah. But is that the best use of, a highly intelligent, organism? And I think there are huge, and we're playing around with AI and trying to see if we can write us reports and stuff, and it's not quite there yet. But and it won't be for a while. And there's always going to be the human angle, because you need someone to be able to look at the whole playing field and go, this is what's going to happen next. AI can't do that. So, but it's something we're definitely embracing, and and other people are embracing as well. It's like the printing press; it's not going away.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, watch this space on that one then. But Spencer, it's been an absolute pleasure.
I enjoyed talking to you.
You've given some really solid advice there. You've given a really good snapshot of the industry that you're involved in. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for being a guest.
Thanks very much, Dom.
Brilliant. All right. Cheers, Spencer. Joining us on the Building Your Career podcast. We hope you enjoyed hearing from our guest and learning about the different career paths available. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe so we can reach even more listeners. And if anyone wants any free CV advice or simply wants to know the options available to them, don't hesitate to get in touch.